Hey guys, welcome back. How have you been doing? I've been doing great. In this video, we're going to talk about image formats and compression and a little bit more about intent. What is the purpose of the picture that you are creating? What do you want to use it for? Image formats. There are a whole number of them out there. Some of the more common ones are GIF or JPEG or PNG or bitmap, or if you're a photographer, RAW files. I'm sure you've heard about GIFs, right? An animated GIF. This is one. That's what all the funny memes are made of, and I'm sure you've encountered a lot of them on the internet in your life, and there will be many more in the future. GIFs are one of the more common file and image types on the internet, but we're not going to talk about them that much today. Today I want to talk about first PNG files and then secondly JPEG files. Now, an image format, or like I just said, a file format, is determined by its extension. So if you save a file on your computer, you're going to have, for instance, an extension like JPEG or an extension like PNG, or in this case, this here is a GIF file, and then this Coca-Cola logo, for instance, is a PNG file. So those are that's what image formats actually mean. It's just a file format that you save an image as. We're going to get the PNGs out of the way first because in these videos I mostly talk to you about photography, and the most common way of distributing photos is actually JPEG files. So what is a PNG file, or what does a PNG image do? One of the things that sets PNGs apart from other image formats is that they feature transparency. So this is the Coca-Cola logo here, and you can see that it overlays the rest of the website. So you have all these happy people in the background. These people are in a photograph, and that is definitely a JPEG file. But the Coca-Cola logo is in front of it, and you see that part of this is transparent because if you look at the file here, this is a square, right? And an image is always going to be square. But part of it, like these things with the checkered background, they are transparent so that the corners around the circle of this logo, they're not visible, right? And that's something that PNG is able to do. The PNG file format is able to do. It features an alpha channel, which means transparency. JPEG files cannot do that. GIF files can do it. So this could have transparency. I could add a transparency layer and then just delete a bunch of stuff and it would be transparent. But in GIF, for instance, the GIF is only going to be able to save 256 colors at the same time, whereas a PNG can go up to 16.7 million colors. There's more different properties of PNG files and GIF files that I'm not going to go into too much here, except one thing. PNG is a lossless compression file format. It means that if you save a file, like let's say you get a raw image from your camera, and a raw image is an image that is taken straight from the sensor and it is not processed at all. It contains all of the information that the camera sensor captured. Every last bit of dynamic range and image information is saved in a raw file, so it is a huge file. And then you could take that raw file and save it as a PNG, and you would not lose any of that information, but you would come up with a smaller file. That's because PNG compression, or also this is also file compression, like for instance a zip file or a 7-zip file or something like that, they will work similarly. They will look for patterns in a file's code and then they will compress them down to shorter ways of expressing the same thing. So for instance, if you have a pattern like this, 54 times the number 2 in a row, then the compression algorithm is just going to say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to say 54 times 2, and then boom, all of this overhead junk is gone. You will see that we have not lost any information because we still know that this 54 times the number 2 that is supposed to be here, but it is just a different, more compressed way of saying the same things. That's how you get a smaller file without actually losing any information. That's what PNG files can do, but that's also something that JPEG files can do even better. Now, a JPEG file is so suitable to photography because it is a way of cutting out all the unnecessary information from a big raw file that you get from a camera that the human eye cannot see. And if you want more about this, if you want more detail about this, I really highly recommend that you check out my JPEG versus RAW salvaging an overexposed photo video which is on the Brand Artery channel, because I go into much more detail about how JPEG does that and what the differences are between RAW and JPEG. So for here, suffice it to say, I want to actually just show you the effects of what JPEG compression can do to a picture if you apply it wrong, and what you could do for you if you apply it wisely. Now, I want to display this picture on the internet. I want to show it to my friends, and I want them to be able to load it on their phone, which, has we talked about resolutions earlier. The resolution of a phone isn't necessarily all that high. It could go up to 1920 by 1080, but many phones have lower resolutions than that. And even if it's higher than that, then they have special technology that has higher resolution, but then converts that. Different topic, but hey, so the first thing I was going to do is, or let me show you first. Okay, so this file, this is the original picture that I took from the internet. It's 5600 by 3700 pixels, and the size of that file on my hard drive is 5.3 megabytes, right? That's a pretty big file. If somebody downloads that from the internet and they're in the subway and they're using the data on their phone, you just burned 5.3 megabytes of their data, and they're not going to be too happy about that, because the phone is just going to load this huge file and it's going to take a long time, and then all it's going to do is zoom out so that the whole thing even fits on the screen, right? So the phone is just going to do this, and there's no point of loading a huge file if all you're going to do afterwards is zoom out. So you might as well just scale the file down to something more closer to this, which is still, a little bit larger than my screen, but I usually use 2000 pixels to scale down, and we talked about downscaling in the previous video. And then, I'm going to save that file. So first of all, by scaling down, I'm going to come up with a smaller file because there's just less information in that now. But the other thing I'm going to do when I export it from GIMP, and this is what other programs can do as well, like OpenView or Photoshop or Lightroom, Darktable, Raw Therapy, all of these are going to be able to export it as a JPEG file. And they're going to ask you, what quality setting do you want to use? So you can either say JPEG or JPEG. I'm going to export, and then here you can set the quality, right? 100% quality means it's still going to be a compressed JPEG, but it's going to be the least amount of compression and the best amount of quality. Whereas if you go down to 20, it's going to be a crap load of compression and it's going to be a really low quality, right? In order to demonstrate this to you, I exported this picture after I scaled it down to 2000, and I saved it as a 20%, 80%, and 90% quality JPEG. First of all, we're going to look at the 20%. Now, you need to look at this on a computer screen, because on your phone you're not going to see the necessary details. But if you look at your computer screen, you can see that this picture is pixelated like crazy. All the way up here you see all these ugly blocks, right? You see blocks here, all the way everywhere in the sky you see blocks here, here, here. You see that the tail has gotten lost on the hay and on the grass. It's compressed so much that the picture has become really ugly. So a 20% quality setting leaves you with a very small file, because a ton of information has been compressed out of the picture. So you have a 130 kilobyte file instead of 5.3 megabyte, but at the expense of a really bad quality. I don't see why anybody would want to do this. Instead, what you can do is, if you save it at 80 or 90%, you're gonna have a really, really, really hard time seeing the difference between the original image and the compressed version at 80%. I'm going to guide your glance up here. This is the 80% picture that we're looking at right now, and if I skip to the 90%, so now it's 80, 90, 80, 90, 80, 90, you're gonna see very, very small differences in quality right there. But nobody in their right mind is going to be able to see that. I recommend that if you want to display a picture on the internet, you want to upload it to Facebook or to Flickr or anything like that. Many of these services apply their own compression as well. But if you want to display it on the internet, save it as an 80% JPEG and scale it down to 2000 pixels. Now, you might also want to print that picture, though. If you want to print that picture, and particularly if you want to print it on a really nice large piece of paper, then the more pixels you have in the picture, the better. Because if you scale it down to fewer pixels and then you blow it up and print it on a piece of paper, then it's going to look bad. Remember, if you do this, you have a really small picture and then you blow it up for a piece of paper so it fits, it's going to look crappy. So in that case, since you're just going to put it on a USB key and bring it to the print shop or print it in your printer at home, it doesn't really matter if the file is all that big. What matters is that there are many, many, many pixels in that file. Ideally, all 21 million pixels should still be there, because now you can print it at a really nice and large size. And that's how you get a really nice printout of the picture where all the details are still visible and nothing is blurry or pixelated. So think about, what is the intent of your picture? What do you want to do? What do you intend to do? And when you know what you want to do you want to display it on the internet? Do you want to publish it somewhere? Do you want to print it? Do you want to send it to somebody to print it or use it in a brochure? Think about that and then consider, how many pixels should I leave intact? And then if you export it, think about, do I really need to keep all the information in the picture? Should I export it as a JPEG or should as a PNG, or should I export it as a JPEG with lossy compression where you lose quality, but you're going to end up with a smaller file? That's it for images, formats, and compression. So thank you very much for watching. And in the next and last video, we're going to talk about printing. Bye.